The solicitor's office smelled of tallow candles and old paper and the specific, dry atmosphere of a room where fortunes changed hands without ceremony. Genevieve Ashford had been in worse rooms. She had spent 3 years in Florence in a series of rented studios whose ceilings leaked when the spring rains came and whose landlords communicated through the walls by shouting, and whose primary virtue was north-facing light, which was the virtue that mattered. She had spent a year before that in Rome in a room that was essentially a corridor with a cot. She had returned to England in March on a ship that smelled considerably worse than old paper, and she had arrived in London with a trunk containing 14 completed canvases and a theoretical fortune she had not yet received and a set of paint-stained fingers hidden under her best pair of gloves. She sat in the solicitor's chair and listened to Mr. Aldwych read the will of her late uncle, Lord George Ashford, and received the terms of the fortune with the composed expression she had been practicing since childhood. The fortune was real. The marriage condition was also real. She received both in the composed manner, and she received the identity of the proposed husband in the same composed manner, and she kept the composed manner in place through the remainder of the reading, and through the formal introductions, and through the first 7 minutes of the conversation that followed the reading in the small anteroom, while Mr. Aldwych attended to his papers. Julian Haverford, Earl of Rosedale, was 33 and had the cool green eyes and the imposing presence of a man who had spent his adult life being the most consequential person in every room he entered, and who had found this, over time, less a pleasure than a professional hazard. He wore his authority the way he wore his coat, correctly, without apparent effort, and in a way that was clearly going to be an imposition on everyone else in the room for the duration of his presence in it. He looked at her with the specific quality of a man conducting an assessment he had already determined the outcome of. She looked at him with the specific quality of a woman who had spent 3 years in Italy being assessed by men who had significantly more experience with assessment than he did, and who had found in 3 years nothing they were looking for. He spoke first. He told her he was aware the arrangement was unconventional, and that he intended to manage it with the appropriate discretion, and that his understanding was that the 6-month courtship period at Rosedale Court was a formality that could be navigated without undue difficulty by 2 intelligent adults who understood their respective interests. She told him the Haverford family had authenticated a forged Titian in 1811, and used the authentication to destroy her uncle's reputation as a collector, and that she found the phrase appropriate discretion somewhat rich coming from a family whose discretion had cost an innocent man 7 years of social exile. He told her he had reviewed that matter and found it considerably more complex than her account suggested. She told him complexity was the usual refuge of people whose position on the simpler facts was indefensible. He told her she had a remarkable facility for arriving at conclusions without the inconvenience of evidence. She told him she was an artist. Evidence was her occupation. He looked at her hands. She became aware, simultaneously, of the paint beneath the left thumbnail that the glove had not quite concealed. She said nothing. He said nothing. The anteroom was very quiet. He told her they would depart for Rosedale Court on the 15th of May, which gave her 6 weeks to arrange her affairs in London. He told her the arrangements at the court had been prepared for her comfort, and he hoped she would find them adequate. He told her the 6 months was a condition of the will, and they were both bound by it, and he saw no purpose in either of them performing an enthusiasm neither felt. She told him she had no intention of performing anything. She told him she had been performing perfectly adequate indifference to the opinions of the English aristocracy for 3 years in Florence, and found the performance required very little effort. He looked at her for a long moment with the green eyes. He told her, until the 15th then. He left the anteroom. She sat in the chair and looked at the paint under her thumbnail, and thought about 6 months in the Cotswolds with a man who viewed artists as frivolous dreamers, which was the phrase his sister had apparently used in a letter to the solicitor that Mr. Aldwych had accidentally allowed her to see. She thought, I have been in worse situations, she thought. The north-facing light in the Cotswolds is supposed to be extraordinary. If you are new to Moonlight at Mayfair, this is the enemies to lovers story you have been waiting for. 2 people who are wrong at each other in the most interesting possible ways, locked together for 6 months in a house with a gallery that whispers secrets. Subscribe before we continue, because what happens at Rosedale Court will change both of them in ways neither of them is prepared for. And if you have been here before, you already know. The man who called her a bohemian fortune hunter is going to end this story asking her to paint him into her life. Watch how we get there. Rosedale Court arrived in May like an argument she had not expected to lose. She had been prepared for grandeur. The Haverford family had been grand for 3 centuries, and the estate in the Cotswolds was the kind of property that appeared in county histories and in the background of portraits she had studied in the Uffizzi's reference collection. She had not been prepared for the specific quality of the light. The Cotswolds in May had the light of a painter's imagining, the long, slant, golden afternoon light that fell across the honey-colored stone of the walls and the green of the formal gardens, in a way that produced the specific sensation of a world composed for the eye rather than simply existing for the eye's incidental benefit. She stood at the carriage window as they came up the drive, and she thought, 3 months of this light and I will have produced the best work of my life. She did not say this to Julian, who was sitting across from her in the carriage, with the parliamentary correspondence she had been watching him, read since Oxford. She had noted, at some point near High Wycombe, that he did not read correspondence the way most men of his position read correspondence, which was with the expression of a man managing the obligation of being informed. He read it with the quality of someone who was actually thinking about what it said. She had not mentioned this. She had returned to the window. The east wing of Rosedale Court had been closed since the previous autumn, when Julian's father's final illness had reduced the household to its essential functions, and the less essential wings had been shut. It had not been formally assigned to her. It had simply been there, the end of the east corridor, the door with the bolt that was stiff from disuse, the large room beyond it with the north-facing window, and the afternoon light that fell across the dusty floor in the way of light that had been falling through windows for 100 years and intended to continue. She found it on the 2nd day. She told no one. By the 4th day, her cousin Rosalind, who had been included in the house party as her companion, and who had the specific, mischievous quality of a girl of 19 who found secrets considerably more interesting than the approved activities of country house visits, had established a supply route. The small canvases, the pigments, the linseed oil, the brushes she had shipped from Florence, and which were the most valuable things she owned, arriving at the east wing door in a series of innocently explained errands. She painted. She had been painting portraits since she was 14, when her uncle had looked at her sketches with the expression of a man encountering something he had not arranged, and which was better than what he had arranged, and had told her, "You have your great-grandmother's eye." The great-grandmother in question had been an artist herself in the previous century, working in watercolor under the name of G. Ashford, which had been the name Genevieve had borrowed when she needed a pseudonym, and which had produced in 3 years of Italian studios a body of work under the name of G. Ash that had acquired in certain art circles the specific reputation of a working painter of the first rank, whose identity was the subject of considerable speculation, and whose work was considered a reliable authentication for significant commissions. She painted the Rosedale Court household one by one in the east wing in the north-facing light. The butler, whose face had the specific dignity of a man who had been managing a great house for 40 years, and who wore that management in every feature. Lady Charlotte, Julian's sister, who had the same green eyes and the same imposing quality, and who deployed both with considerably more warmth than her brother, and who had been, since the 2nd day of the house party, conducting a campaign to produce goodwill between the betrothed parties that was the most cheerful form of interference Genevieve had encountered. The head groom, whose face had the beauty of a man who had spent his life outdoors, and whose features had been shaped by the outdoors as stone was shaped by water. She did not paint Julian, not yet. The long gallery ran the full length of the south face of the house and had been assembled over 3 generations by the Haverford family, with the specific combination of genuine connoisseurship and fashionable acquisition that produced, in the best country house collections, something that was neither purely taste nor purely status, but the honest record of what a family had loved and purchased across a century. She found it on the 3rd morning and stood in it for 45 minutes before Julian found her. He came in from the east door with the expression of a man conducting a habitual morning inspection and encountering an unexpected variable. He stopped at the end of the gallery and looked at her. She was standing before a landscape she had recognized it from 2 feet away as the work of the Flemish master whose work she had spent 6 months studying in Florence, and she was standing with the specific quality of attention that a person gives to a painting they are actually looking at, rather than viewing. He told her the landscape was acquired by his grandfather in 1763 in Antwerp. She told him the attribution was correct, and the condition was suffering slightly from the position on the south wall, which received too much afternoon light in June and July. He told her he had made the same observation to his father in 1812, and been informed that the south wall was the south wall and the painting would remain where it was. She told him she could move it for the summer months and restore it to the south wall in September. She told him the undertaking required 2 men and approximately 40 minutes. He looked at her. She looked at the Flemish landscape. He told her to proceed. This was not the beginning of the alliance. The alliance was still some weeks away. It was the beginning of the specific, uncomfortable understanding that the person he had arrived at Rosedale Court prepared to manage was not the person he was managing. The person he had been prepared to manage was the bohemian fortune hunter, reckless, self-interested, likely to find the 6 months tiresome and the arrangement distasteful, and to make both feelings known through the specific, theatrical discontent of someone performing their own victimhood. The person standing before his grandfather's Flemish landscape was telling him the painting was suffering from incorrect placement and offering to move it, which was the action not of a fortune hunter, but of someone who cared about the painting for its own sake. He did not yet know what to do with this. He filed it and continued the morning inspection. The Whispering Gallery was on the first floor of the house, in the rotunda above the entrance hall, an architectural feature his great-grandfather had commissioned from a builder who had been inspired, he had written in the Estate Journal, by the Whispering Gallery at St. Paul's Cathedral. The principle was the same. A curved wall along which a voice spoken at the lowest audible level would carry to the opposite side of the curve with perfect clarity, while a voice spoken at normal volume in the center of the room disappeared entirely. Most guests discovered it by accident. She discovered it by reading the Estate Journal, which Mr. Aldwych had included in the document package as background material, and which she had read on the carriage from London because she read everything she was given. She was in the gallery on a Thursday afternoon in June, when the rain came. It came with the specific sudden quality of English summer rain that had been building since noon, and had been visible to anyone who looked at the sky, and had not been looked at because the sky was not the direction the household had been looking. She was in the gallery because the gallery had the best natural light in the house for the work she was doing, which was preparing the Flemish landscape for its summer move by examining the varnish condition in detail, and the rain was irrelevant to this work except that it made the light change. Julian came in from the other door. He came in with the specific quality of a man who had come to a habitual place and found it already occupied, which was the quality she was becoming familiar with, as the description of his relationship to her presence at Rosedale Court. She was always somewhere he had not arranged for her to be, doing something he had not prepared for, in a way that required him to update his understanding of the situation. The gallery curved between them. He was at the north point of the curve. She was at the south. The rain on the windows made the room close, and the closeness was the specific warmth of a room that has been shut in summer and is now sealed by rain. She spoke at the level that the gallery required, low, almost not quite aloud, and said, "Your grandfather had excellent taste in builders." His voice came back around the curve with perfect fidelity. He had excellent taste in most things, less so in sons. She looked at the wall of the gallery. She said, "The 1811 authentication." The pause before his answer was the pause of a man deciding whether to answer honestly or to manage the answer. He answered honestly. He told her his father had known that Titian was suspicious. He told her the authentication had been provided as a favor to a man his father owed a debt to, and that the debt was financial and the favor had been considered, in his father's calculation, as the kind of transaction that was private and therefore contained. He told her his father had not considered that the authentication would be used to attack her uncle specifically, and that when the attack began, his father had lacked the courage to retract the authentication, and the consequences had followed. She stood at the south point of the curve and listened to the rain on the windows. She told him, "My uncle spent 7 years in a social exile he had not earned because of the cowardice of your family." He told her, yes. He told her he had no argument against that. He told her the estate's contribution to the restoration of the Ashford collection, the provision that had been built into the will's terms alongside the marriage condition, had been his proposal to the family solicitors, not the solicitor's own idea. She had not known this. She stood with it for a long moment. She told him. Why? He told her, and the whispering gallery gave his voice the specific, private quality of a confession said in a small room, the intimacy of something that had been chosen to be given. That he had been 26 in 1811, and had been unable to stop what his father had done, and had been doing the arithmetic of it ever since. He told her a debt unpaid at one generation became a weight at the next, and he had not wanted to carry his father's weight into his own life without attempting to put it down. She looked at the curved wall. She told him, I came back from Florence expecting to dislike you. She told him she had been preparing the disliking since Mr. Aldwich's letter in March. He told her the preparation had been apparent. She told him she was reconsidering the position. He told her the reconsideration was noted. The rain on the windows continued. The gallery curved between them, carrying their voices around its arc with the perfect fidelity of a mechanism built for exactly this, the transmission of things that were too true to say in the middle of a room where everyone could hear. She stayed at the south point. He stayed at the north. The curve held everything between them. He sat for the portrait on a Tuesday in July. She had asked him on a Monday with the directness she brought to everything she wanted, and which he had been finding, over the course of 7 weeks at Rosedale Court, simultaneously the most disorienting and the most refreshing quality in his acquaintance. Other people managed their requests. She simply made them. She told him she needed to paint him. She told him the portrait was for her own purposes, not for the will, not for the estate, not for any formal commission, and that his consent was required, and that if he declined she would find a different subject. He asked her why him specifically. She told him, because your face is the most compositionally interesting I have encountered since Florence, and I have been wanting to paint it since the solicitor's office. He had not expected that answer. He had not, he was beginning to understand, expected any of the answers she gave, which was part of the problem and also, in a way he was not yet prepared to name, part of the specific quality of her company that he found himself returning to in the evenings when the parliamentary correspondence was done. He told her, Tuesday at 10. She had the East Wing studio arranged for the sitting. The chair in the north light, the canvas already primed, her palette laid out with the specific, methodical precision of a person who ran her work with the same discipline she applied to everything. She told him to sit in the chair and not to perform anything. He told her he did not perform. She told him, everyone performs. The absence of performance is itself a performance for most people. She told him she was asking him for something different, which was simply to be in the chair and to allow her to look. He sat in the chair. She looked. This was the part that the people who had sat for portraits before understood in theory and found in practice to be considerably more than they had anticipated. The looking was not the incidental, social looking of a room, the assessment and classification look, the inventory look, the I see you and have filed you look. It was the full, specific, attending look of a person who was looking because the looking was the work, and the work was to understand what was actually there. He had been looked at in many rooms over the course of his adult life. He had not been looked at like this. She held the charcoal lightly. She made the first marks. She did not speak for the first 20 minutes. When she spoke, she asked him about his father, not about the authentication or the debt which they had addressed in the gallery, but about the man, what he had been like before the decisions that had defined him in his son's account. He told her about the elder Lord Haverford in the way that was available to him, which was the way of a man who had spent 15 years constructing a careful understanding of his relationship to his father's failures, and who found, in the directness of the question, that the careful construction was not what was being asked for. He told her he was funny. Before the investments went wrong, before the debts accumulated and the decisions followed, he had been a man who could make a table of 30 people laugh, and who had read the children's stories with accents for every character, and who had been in the specific private territory of a child's experience of a parent, the best thing available. She moved the charcoal. He told her the careful construction was easier to maintain when no one asked about the before. She told him, the before is where the person is. The after is just the catalogue of their decisions. She worked. He watched her face as she worked. The specific quality of her attention when she was in the act of painting was different from her attention in any other context. It had the quality of something that had been distilled to its essential function, the ordinary social operations of a face reduced to their minimum, while the one capacity that mattered was fully deployed. Her eyes went between the canvas and him with the regularity of breathing, and what was on her face when she looked at him was nothing that required managing in return. He felt, in the East Wing studio on a Tuesday morning in July, the specific and unfamiliar sensation of being seen by someone who was looking for nothing except what was actually there. He did not know what to do with this. He kept sitting. She worked until noon. She told him that was sufficient for the first session. She turned the canvas away from him when she set down the charcoal, not with the performance of someone protecting a secret, but with the practical directness of someone who was not ready to show unfinished work. He told her, "I would like to see it when it is finished." She told him, "You will," he told her, and it was the specific quality of something said without arrangement. The sentence that arrived before it had been assessed for the appropriate time and form. That he had not spoken about his father in that way since his father died. She looked at him across the studio. She told him, "I know, the canvas told me." He looked at her. She picked up a brush and turned to a secondary study she was working on, which communicated that the conversation was complete, and that its completion was sufficient. And he left the studio with the specific, weightless quality of a man who has set down something he has been carrying and is not yet certain what to do with the absence of the weight. The forgeries arrived in the third week of July. Not physically, they had been arriving in London auction rooms for months, which was when Julian's agent in the city had begun the inquiries. What arrived at Rosedale Court was the specific, detailed account of those inquiries in a letter from the agent that reached Julian on a Monday morning, and that he read 3 times before coming to find her. She was in the Long Gallery, which had become one of the territories of their working relationship. She came to examine the collection and to check the Flemish landscape's condition in its new position, and he came because the gallery was part of his morning, and the intersection of their morning routines in the gallery had produced, over the weeks, the kind of conversation that required no arrangement because the setting was already established. He gave her the letter. She read it. The forgeries were being authenticated in the London market under a documentation that cited the provenance research of G. Ash, whose authentication work was considered reliable in significant acquisition circles, and whose identity was widely speculated about, but not publicly known. The forgeries were of Ashford family collection pieces, specifically 3 works that her uncle had sold under duress during his social exile, and which had apparently re-entered the market in fraudulent form. She read the letter twice. She told him, "I did not authenticate those paintings." He told her he knew. She looked at him. He told her, "I have seen your work. In the East Wing, in the studies on the secondary canvas, in the manner in which you look at the Flemish landscape. The person who authenticated those paintings was not looking at them. The authentication documents contained technical errors that someone with your level of knowledge would not make." He told her he had identified this from the copies of the authentication documents the agent had included with his letter. He told her, "Someone is using your name to move fraudulent works." She sat with this. She told him the someone had access to her correspondence, specifically to the letters she had sent from Florence to English dealers and collectors under the G. Ash name, which contained her working methods and her analytical approach, and from which a sufficiently careful forger could construct a plausible imitation of her authentication style. He told her, who had access to that correspondence. She thought through it with the systematic attention she gave to things that required precise answers. 2 dealers, 3 collectors, her uncle's solicitor, who had managed her correspondence during the period when she had not had a fixed Italian address, and Mr. Aldwich's office, to whom the uncle's estate correspondence, including her letters about art acquisitions, had been transferred after her uncle's death. She told Julian, the solicitor's office. Someone with access to the estate documents. He told her, the estate documents include the will's terms, including the condition that produces my obligation to the marriage arrangement. She told him, which produces the inheritance. He told her, which produces the motive. They looked at each other in the Long Gallery. The Flemish landscape was in its summer position on the east wall. The morning light was the morning light of a Cotswolds July that had decided to be extraordinary. She told him, your distant cousin, Reginald Haverford, the one who stands to benefit if the marriage condition is not met. He told her he had been thinking about Reginald for approximately 48 hours and had been hoping the thinking was wrong. She told him the thinking was not wrong. She told him she had met Reginald twice, at the will reading and at the London reception in May, and she had found him both times the specific kind of man who managed his intelligence behind the performance of a lesser version of it, which was a quality she had encountered in one particular type of forger and in no other context. Julian looked at the landscape. He told her, "We need to proceed carefully. The evidence is insufficient at present, and Reginald is not without his own allies in the legal community." She told him she had been gathering evidence for 3 years under a pseudonym in a foreign country, and found the work considerably more tractable than the legal community gave it credit for. He looked at her. She looked back. He told her, "I believe we have found something to do together this summer." She told him, "I believe we have." August was the summer of the working together. They moved between London and Rosedale Court with the specific, purposeful quality of two people who have identified a problem and are applying their respective capabilities to it with the full force of their respective capabilities. He worked the legal and financial dimensions, the auction house records, the provenance chains, the pattern of transactions that, mapped against each other, described the shape of an operation that had been running for at least 18 months and had been constructed with the careful attention of someone who understood both the art market and the inheritance law well enough to exploit the gap between them. She worked the aesthetic dimensions, the forgeries themselves, which required close physical examination and which she obtained access to through a network of Florence contacts who were in London for the season and who knew both the genuine work and the forgeries in the way that only people who had been looking at both for months could know them. She documented the technical evidence, the anachronistic pigments, the incorrect canvas preparation, the specific quality of the brushwork that imitated her style without possessing its foundation. Sir Edmund Carey, the art collector who had been one of the original London buyers of G. Ash's authentication services, became the unlikely ally the situation required. He was 70, eccentric, and possessed of the specific, fearless quality of a very old man who had long ago stopped caring what the social world thought of him and had found the freedom of not caring enormously productive. He had been suspicious of the forged authentications from the beginning, had said so to his own agent, who had filed the observation under the category of an old man's contrarianism, and he received Genevieve's approach with the quality of a man who has been waiting for someone to take him seriously. He provided 3 original G. Ash authentication documents from his own records for comparison against the forged ones. He also provided, in the course of a long afternoon at his Mayfair house, a piece of information that had been sitting in his memory since March, that he had seen Reginald Haverford at an auction preview in February, in close conversation with the dealer who had subsequently handled the 3 fraudulent authentication documents. She told Julian this that evening in the library at Rosedale Court, where the evenings had become the hour for consolidating what the day had produced. The library was warm in August, the windows open to the gardens, the candles lit for the document work they were doing. He received the information with a quality she had come to expect from him. The full, attending reception, the assessment that was visible in his face as a kind of working rather than a kind of performance. He had a legal mind. She had understood over August, in the specific sense of a mind that found clarity in evidence and was uncomfortable with the absence of it and was very good at constructing the path from insufficient evidence to sufficient. She had an artist's mind, which found pattern in what presented itself to observation, and which was constitutionally resistant to the alternative that no pattern existed. Together they had been producing, across the August evenings, a picture of Reginald Haverford's operation that was becoming sufficient. She told him, on the evening she brought the Carey information, "We are nearly there," he told her. Yes. She told him she wanted to discuss the autumn ball. He told her, "Go ahead." She told him the ball was the occasion Reginald would use. She had been thinking about it since July, the structure of Reginald's approach, which was the approach of a man who was using social occasion as instrument, who had chosen the forgery strategy precisely because its exposure would be social as well as legal. The exposure of G. Ash as Lady Genevieve Ashford at a public social occasion would be the instrument. A woman who had been passing herself off as a male artist, whose authentication work had been used to move fraudulent paintings, whose name was now associated with an art scandal in the same year she was, attempting to claim an inheritance. The scandal would be precisely targeted to destroy the marriage condition before the deadline, and Reginald would arrange the extra himself at the autumn ball, where the maximum number of witnesses would be present. Julian looked at the documents on the library table. He told her, "You have been anticipating this," she told him. "I have been anticipating it since July." She told him the anticipation was not pleasant, but it was useful, because it meant she was not arriving at the occasion without preparation. He told her, "What preparation have you made?" She told him she had written a letter to the Chronicle. He looked at her. She told him, "The letter is from G. Ash. It was written in July and I have been deciding when to release it. It discloses the author's identity as Lady Genevieve Ashford, addresses the forgery situation directly with the technical evidence we have assembled, and establishes the distinction between the genuine authentication work and the fraudulent use of the name. It was submitted to the Chronicle this afternoon for publication in the autumn edition." He was quiet for a moment. He told her, "You took control of the disclosure," she told him. "Reginald's scheme depends on the revelation being his. If the revelation is mine, the scheme is without its instrument," she told him. "The letter was submitted this afternoon. The Chronicle publishes in 3 weeks. The autumn ball is in 4. He looked at her across the library table with the green eyes and the expression she had been learning since the solicitor's office, and which she was beginning to understand contained more of him than the imposing surface suggested. The expression of a man encountering something he had not planned for, and finding the encounter, despite the weight of everything else, the most interesting thing in the room. He told her, "Your uncle was right about your eye." She told him, "He was right about most things." He told her, with the quiet precision of someone who is saying something they have been thinking about for some time, and have now decided to say, "I owe you an apology of a different kind from the one the family owed your uncle." He told her he had arrived at this house in May, prepared to manage a situation, and had found, instead, a person, and the managing had proved impossible, and the finding had proved. He stopped. He found the form. He told her the finding had proved to be the best thing that had happened to him, since he understood that managing situations was not the same as inhabiting a life. The library was warm, and the August night was the August night, and the documents on the table were the evidence of 8 weeks of work done. "Together," she told him, "the portrait is finished." He looked at her. She told him she had finished it that afternoon, before she went to the Chronicle's offices, and that she would show it to him tomorrow. He told her, tomorrow. The autumn ball at Rosedale Court was the occasion of the season. Lady Charlotte had organized it with the specific, formidable competence of a woman who had been organizing the social calendar of a large estate since she was 22, and who understood that the function of a social occasion was partly the occasion itself, and partly the narrative it produced in the world that observed it. She had organized it as a presentation, the first significant social gathering of the betrothed couple at their future home, attended by 300 of the relevant witnesses, conducted in the rooms that would be theirs. Genevieve wore the dress that Rosalind had helped her choose, which was the specific blue-grey of the Tyrrhenian Sea in the early morning, and she wore it with the gloves which she had been wearing to all the social occasions at Rosedale Court, except the ones in the East Wing, and which had the specific function of concealing the paint-stained fingers from a room that was not yet ready for them. Reginald Haverford was in attendance. He was in attendance with the quality she had been watching for since July, the specific social quality of a man who is at an occasion with a purpose, and is managing his purpose with the smooth competence of someone who has been planning for months. He circulated. He was charming. He positioned himself near the relevant clusters of social authority in the room. She watched him from the edge of the ballroom with Julian at her side. Julian watched him with the quality of a man who had been thinking about this specific situation for 3 weeks, and who had a solicitor's response to the forgery evidence now complete and ready to be submitted to the appropriate legal authority the following morning. Reginald made his move at 10:30. He moved toward the cluster near the east windows that included 3 of the season's most active gossips and Lady Pemberton, who was the specific, comprehensive conduit through which significant social narratives passed into general circulation, and he began speaking. They were too far away to hear the words, but the quality of the cluster's response was readable. The slight stiffening, the looks in Genevieve's direction, the specific quality of a group receiving information they had not possessed and were assessing for its value. Julian said quietly, "Shall we?" She said, "Yes." They crossed the room. They arrived at the cluster as Reginald was producing a document from his coat. A copy, she saw, of one of the fraudulent authentication letters with her name on it, and beginning to say something about the distinguished artist, known as G. Ash, and the interesting questions about the provenance of the Ashford collection, and a matter of some significance to the inheritance. Julian spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not perform the authority which was a choice, she noted, and which was, she had come to understand, the truest form of his authority, the kind that did not require elevation because it was simply what he was. He spoke in the even, certain tone of a man stating established fact to a room that had just been given the wrong information and was being offered the correct version. He told the cluster that the identity of the artist G. Ash had been disclosed to the Westminster Chronicle 3 weeks ago in a letter written and signed by Lady Genevieve Ashford herself, which would appear in the autumn edition, and which described, in full technical detail, the distinction between her genuine authentication work and the fraudulent use of her name in the art market. He told them the forgery scheme and its instrument, the man currently standing in his ballroom with a fraudulent document in his hand, had been the subject of a formal legal submission to the appropriate authority that morning, which had been accepted and was now a matter of record. He told them his betrothed was the most significant British portrait artist of her generation, working under a pseudonym that had been necessary precisely because the world they were standing in had not been prepared to receive the work without the name. He told them that condition was now concluded. He looked at Reginald Haverford. He told Reginald, "My solicitor has the full documentary record," he told him. "I would suggest the document in your hand is not the one you want to be holding at this particular moment." The cluster was the specific, ringing silence of a social occasion receiving a reversal it had not anticipated. Reginald left the ballroom. Lady Pemberton looked at Genevieve with the expression of a woman revising a considerable quantity of prior assessment. She told her, "The portrait work, the Haverford collection?" Genevieve told her, "The Flemish landscape is in better condition than it has been in 20 years, she told her. "If you would like to come to Rosedale Court in the new year, I can show you the rest of the work." Lady Pemberton told her she would come in February. The paintings were in the East Wing studio. He came to find her there at midnight, after the last guests had departed and the house had settled into its after-occasion quiet, and the candles in the long gallery had been extinguished, and the East Wing corridor had the specific, still warmth of a part of a house that had been lived in intensively and was now resting. She was standing in the studio with the candles lit, looking at the finished portrait. He came to stand beside her, and he looked at it too. It was him, it was undeniably, specifically him, not the imposing surface, not the Earl of Rosedale conducting his responsibilities through the rooms of a life that had been arranged for him by other people's decisions. It was the face he had worn in the chair on a Tuesday morning in July when she had asked about his father's before, and the Tuesday morning quality was in it. The quality of a man whose careful construction had been set aside for one morning in a north-facing room while someone looked at him without agenda. He was quiet for a long time. He told her, "Is this what I look like?" She told him, "It is what you look like when you are not managing anything." He told her he had not known. She told him, "Most people do not. The managing is so habitual it becomes what they think the face is." He looked at the portrait. He looked at her. He told her, "I came here in May expecting a burden and a name to restore." She heard the quality of his voice and she turned to look at him. He told her, "Instead, I found a woman who sees the world in colors I had forgotten existed." He told her, "Paint me into your life, Jenny. Marry me, not because a will demands it, but because I cannot imagine another day without your rebellion, your vision." He paused. He told her, "And your heart." She looked at him in the East Wing studio, which was the room where she had come to do the work that was most entirely herself, which was also now the room where he had come to say this, which made the room the correct room for both of those things simultaneously. She held out her hand. He took it. Her paint-stained fingers were bare. She had removed the gloves hours ago, before the ball, because she had decided that Reginald's move would not be the last time someone in that room looked at her hands and understood what they meant, and she would rather they understood it on her own terms than on his. The paint under the left thumbnail was, depending on your perspective, either a detail or the whole of the thing. He held her hand with the quality of a man who had decided to hold something and intended to hold it. She told him, "I have been painting the world since I was 14, and I have been painting it alone for most of that time, and the painting is the thing I will not give up. And you should understand that the painting will take the east wing and the north-facing light and 2 mornings a week at minimum and more in the seasons when the light is right." He told her, "The east wing is yours, the light is yours. The mornings are yours," she told him, "and the rest," he told her, "the rest is ours." She looked at the portrait of him in the north-facing light with the before face on it. She told him, yes. She told him, all of it. The exhibition had been Rosalind's idea, in the specific way that Rosalind's ideas arrived, with complete conviction and no regard for the difficulty of the execution, which meant that the execution fell to everyone else, and was achieved through the combined effort of a household that had learned, across the past 10 months, what it looked like when the woman in the East Wing was working toward a deadline. The first public exhibition of the work of Lady Genevieve Haverford, Countess of Rosedale, née Ashford, formerly known in certain circles as G. Ash, was held in the Long Gallery at Rosedale Court on the 14th of April, 1819, 1 year and 1 week after the will reading in Mr. Aldwich's office. 47 paintings. Lady Pemberton came as she had promised. Sir Edmund Carey came, with the expression of a very old man who has been right about something for a long time, and is receiving the public confirmation with the equanimity of someone who never needed the confirmation but finds it pleasant. Lady Charlotte arranged the guest list with the efficiency she brought to all arrangements, and added at the last moment a representative from the Royal Academy who had been inquiring about the Haverford acquisition rumours and whom she had decided should see the source directly. The Long Gallery had been rehung for the occasion, the permanent collection supplemented by the new work which occupied the east wall and the north wall, and the 2 full-length spaces near the entrance that were, when seen together, the complete record of a year at Rosedale Court. The butler, the head groom, Lady Charlotte in the conservatory with the winter light behind her, the household in their various territories, painted with the full, specific, attending look that was her gift and her inheritance, and which produced, in paint, the thing she had learned from her uncle and from 3 years in Florence. Not the surface, but what the surface contained. The portrait of Julian was on the east wall. It hung between a landscape study of the cliff face above the Windrush and a small portrait of Rosalind that had been completed in an afternoon, and which Rosalind had declared the most interesting depiction of herself she had encountered. The Julian portrait was the largest canvas in the exhibition and the first one that the room moved toward, in the specific way that rooms moved toward the work that was doing the most. She stood with him before it in the late afternoon, when most of the guests had circulated, and the gallery had the warm, tired quality of a room that has done its work. Lady Pemberton had said to her, in passing, "I had not understood before today what it meant," and then had gone on to the next canvas without explaining what she had meant, which was either evasive or perfect, and which Genevieve thought was probably both. Julian was looking at the portrait with the quality of a man, looking at something that still surprised him slightly, which she found the correct response. She told him, "The next one will be better." He told her, "I do not see how," she told him, "because the next one will have more time in it. This one was 8 weeks. The next one will have whatever time we have." He looked at her. She told him she had a title for the next one. He asked her what the title was. She told him, "The one in the Whispering Gallery." She told him she wanted to paint them both, together, in the gallery, his voice and her voice going around the curve of the wall to each other, the specific, impossible intimacy of a space where you could say the true thing at the lowest possible volume and have it arrive. He told her, "Paint it," she told him Tuesday. He told her, "I will sit for as long as it requires," she told him. "It will require a very long time," he told her. "I have the time." She took his hand. The gallery was warm with the April afternoon, and the guests were moving toward the refreshment table with the pleasant quality of people who have looked at something real and are carrying the looking with them into the evening. The Flemish landscape was on the east wall in its correct position, where it had been since September, in the steady north light that it had always deserved. The portrait of Julian was beside it with the before face showing. Through the gallery windows, the Cotswolds' April was the April she had arrived in, the same long, slant, gold light on the honey-coloured stone, the same green of the formal gardens, the world composed for the eye. She thought, "I have never painted this light," she thought. I have an entire life to do it in, she told Julian. I want to walk the gardens, he told her. I know a good path, she told him. Show me. They went. The April light was behind them, and the Cotswolds April was before them, and the gallery held the record of a year, 47 paintings. One whispering gallery, two people who had arrived in a solicitor's office in April of 1818, prepared to manage a situation and had found, in the finding, something neither of them had managed for. The portrait of Julian watched them go. The before face was in it, and the Tuesday morning, and the East Wing studio with its north-facing light. The after was out the door, and perhaps that is why this story will not let us go. Not because the forgery ring was exposed, or the cousin was removed from the field, or the portrait was hung in the long gallery, but because of the Tuesday morning, the East Wing studio, the chair in the north light. A man who arrived prepared to be the Earl of Rosedale for 2 hours, performing nothing, and was seen instead. She had told him, everyone performs. The absence of performance is itself a performance for most people. I am asking you for something different, to be in the chair and allow me to look. And he had sat, and she had looked, and the looking had produced the before face. The face that was his before the weight of his father's decisions, had arranged the imposing surface over it, and the portrait had become the evidence of the thing that was true before the title and the responsibility and the careful construction. They had met as enemies. They had been meeting as something else since the Whispering Gallery in June, when the rain had come and he had told her the truth about his father in a voice that the curve of the wall had carried to her with perfect fidelity. The Whispering Gallery was designed for exactly this. Our transmission of things too true to say in the middle of a room where everyone could hear, carried around the curve of the architecture to the one person on the other side who needed to receive them. She had built a life in the art of seeing what was actually there, without the surface, without the management, without the arranged version. He had spent 33 years being the arranged version. She showed him, in the north-facing light of a Tuesday morning, what was under it. He showed her in the Whispering Gallery that it had always been there. That is the whole of it. That is always the whole of it. Two people seeing each other, not the version managed for the room, not the position held for the family, not the name maintained for the estate, but the actual, present, paint-stained, before-faced, entirely themselves thing.